At this point, we're going to move into that question and answer session. And again, these are all questions that were previously provided over the course of this evening's meeting. So I'd like to go ahead and start with a question from Deneen Ostin for Lisa Landers. Lisa Landers, the question here is, why does the government want to install these huge turbines without testing?
Thanks, Pam, and thank you for your question. My name is Lisa Landers. I'm the NEPA Section Chief in BOEM's Office of Renewable Energy Programs. BOEM's mission is to facilitate the responsible development of renewable energy resources on the Outer Continental Shelf, or OCS, through conscientious planning, stakeholder engagement, comprehensive environmental analysis, and sound technical review. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 authorized the development of regulations for the OCS Renewable Energy Program. This regulatory framework establishes a process for the review of proposed offshore wind projects. The issuance of the lease for Atlantic Shores North, which is OCSA 0549, provides the lessee, Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind LLC, with the right to submit a construction operations plan for an offshore wind energy facility, which BOEM will then review. Publication of the notice of intent for the Atlantic Shores North offshore wind energy project commenced this public scoping process to identify issues and potential alternatives for consideration in the environmental impact statement. Issues identified today and during the comment period will be analyzed by BOEM in the EIS.
Great, thank you for the question, and thanks for that response, Lisa. I have two other questions for you, Lisa, and I kind of grouped these together because they were similar in nature. One question's from Margaret Bagley. Both questions were from Margaret Bagley. I'd like to know if BOEM has done a genuine analysis of all form of energy from conception to decommissioning as far as affordability, longevity, and reliability. If so, please provide that analysis and how you interpreted it to come to the conclusion that OSW turbines benefits outweigh the potential disastrous effects on the ocean environment, ecosystems, and economies of local coastal communities versus all of other sources of potential clean energy, i.e. nuclear, geothermal, hydrogen, bioenergy, water, and solar. Is your charter to preserve the ocean, or is your charter to come up with a location with less impact, even though it's been determined that there will be devastating consequences? And similarly, how has New Jersey BPU done a cost-benefit analysis of offshore wind versus all other forms of clean energy, i.e. nuclear, geothermal, hydrogen, bioenergy, water, solar, and gas? And where is this data published?
Yes, thank you for these questions. As I noted in my previous response, BOEM's mission is to facilitate the responsible development of renewable energy resources on the Outer Continental Shelf, or OCS. The most commercially viable renewable technology is offshore wind, with about 60 gigawatts operating globally as of last year. The project proposal, which has been submitted to BOEM, is for an offshore wind facility, and that proposal will be evaluated in terms of environmental impacts through this EIS process. In terms of emissions, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has conducted a life cycle assessment harmonization analysis that compares many electricity generation technologies to one another. Offshore wind compares favorably with all other major electricity generation technologies. This National Renewable Energy Laboratory NREL has harmonized approximately 3,000 life cycle assessment studies with around 240 published life cycle assessments of land-based and offshore wind technologies. While wind has a higher upstream cost than many other generation methods, its life cycle assessment is magnitudes lower. A link to this analysis is being posted in the chat. Specifically regarding the last question for New Jersey BPU, questions regarding the cost-benefit analysis should be directed to New Jersey BPU.
Great, thank you, Lisa, and thank you again for the question. This question is from Denise Bosia, and Lisa, I'd have you address this one as well. Why has BOEM just strengthened the decommissioning rules for oil and gas platforms, but not for offshore wind?
Sure, I can answer this as well, Pam. The Bureau of Environmental Safety and Enforcement, or BESI, is charged with oversight of facility decommissioning. A lessee's decommissioning application must be submitted to BESI prior to decommissioning. The decommissioning application will be approved with conditions, or disapproved after review. The contents of a decommissioning application submitted to BOEM are listed in BOEM's regulations at 30 CFR 285.906.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And another question from you, also from Denise Bosia. The question here is, who within BOEM makes the decisions as to how the EIS is structured and what information should or should not be in it?
Sure. The White House Council on Environmental Quality's regulation for implementing the National Environmental Policy Act identifies the recommended format and required content for the EIS. And so this dictates the structure of the document that BOEM prepares.
Thanks, Lisa. Another question also from Denise Bosia. And this one is, we noticed that BOEM's scoring system in the EIS has no category for an unacceptable impact. What environmental impact then would cause BOEM to disapprove a project?
Thank you, Denise, for this question as well. The EIS for Atlantic Shores North has not been prepared yet. The scoping process initiates the EIS preparation process. However, for other offshore wind EISs, BOEM has used a 4-level classification scheme to characterize the potential beneficial and adverse impacts, and those levels are negligible, minor, moderate, or major. The EIS is the analysis and disclosure of potential impacts and benefits of the project. The EIS will inform BOEM's decision of whether to approve with modifications, or disapprove the construction operations plan. And these, per our regulations in 30 CFR 585.628.
Thanks, Lisa. Next question for you as well is from Eric Nussbaum. And the question is there a decommissioning fund that is pre-established? In the event of a company skipping out prior to complete decommissioning, New Jersey residents should not be held financially responsible for funding that removal. Prepayment into an untouchable fund would be important.
Thank you, Eric, for this question. BOEM requires that the lessee provides a decommissioning bond or other financial assurance, and this is based on the anticipated decommissioning costs and is provided prior to facility installation. Financial assurance requirements are described in detail in BOEM's regulations at 30 CFR 585.516.
Thanks, Lisa. Another question from Eric Nussbaum for you. Will BOEM have monitors on site to monitor construction and impact of noise? Who is the head of BOEM? How many BOEM employees are there? Will BOEM have their own boats and planes for monitoring? How involved will BOEM be involved in the implementation and development process?
BOEM has the authority to conduct inspections of facilities on the Outer Continental Shelf for OCS. Also, the lessee must submit annual compliance certifications, which show compliance with the construction operations plan and conditions of approval. BOEM's regulations regarding inspections and certification of compliance are found at 30 CFR 285. Additional information regarding BOEM can be found on BOEM's website, and this website will be posted in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, for responding to those questions, and thank you all for posing those questions. The next set of questions I have are for Kimberly Sullivan. Kim, the first question here is from Deneen Ostin, and the question is, has government properly considered the many negative impacts of this project?
Hi, thank you for the comment. My name is Kimberly Sullivan, and I am the NEPA coordinator in the Office of Renewable Energy Programs, managing this project. The publication of the Notice of Intent initiated a 45-day public scoping process for the Atlantic Shores North project, during which issues, potential alternatives, and potential mitigation measures are identified for the analysis in the EIS. BOEM will publish a draft EIS, which will identify and describe the potential effects of the proposed project and the alternatives on the environment.
Thanks, Kim. We have a group of questions. A lot are fairly similar, and so I want to kind of present them all to you at the same time and see if you could respond to them. Some of the folks who provided these comments include Deneen Ostin, an anonymous attendee, Denise Bosia, Patrick Gallen, Teresa Boyle-Vellucci, and Bob Stern. And these questions revolve around, why is there no in-person forum like this call in LBI? With these turbines being proposed just 8 miles off our shoreline, it's unfathomable that there's no in-person meeting with BOEM and the residents of LBI. The nearest in-person meeting location was over 50 miles away from LBI, and we request an in-person meeting on LBI or Manahawkin. During the in-person meeting on 4/10 in Staten Island, New York, I asked Lisa, who works with Kimberly Sullivan, why an in-person meeting was not held at the landfall area of Seagirt, New Jersey, as I noticed about 6 attendees present at the Staten Island venue. Lisa responded, they did look at Seagirt, but they were unable to secure a venue. Can you please advise which venues were contacted in Seagirt, New Jersey? And then regarding the case of statewide interest, can BOEM accept recommendations for venues? With the next Atlantic Shores in-person meeting, can we suggest venues on Long Beach Island, where over 350 turbines over 1,000 feet tall are proposed 8.4 miles off the coast of LBI? Who should suggestions for future venues be emailed to? Why aren't there any in-person meetings in the LBI area? Can people access this presentation? Why was the meeting not held in Long Beach Island, the area directly impacted? And why was one of the studies considered by BOEM a study conducted by Atlantic Shores? This is a conflict. Will BOEM hold real public hearings on LBI where people can speak in person to BOEM management?
I'd like to thank everybody for their comments. As BOEM works to select locations for in-person meetings that are central as possible to populations affected by the project. BOEM also provides virtual meetings like this one to broaden access to those who are not able to attend the scheduled in-person meetings. When BOEM starts to identify locations that have public meetings for a construction operations plan, environmental impact statement, the first step is to locate venues close to where the project is proposed to come to shore. For the Atlantic Shores North project, there is a proposal to make landfall in 2 possible locations in New Jersey and 2 possible locations in New York. The 2 locations in New Jersey were close enough to combine them into a single meeting. The 2 locations in New York City were not close enough to combine the meetings. BOEM will consider your suggested meeting locations when planning for future public meetings following the publication of the draft EIS. A recording of the meeting and a copy of the slide deck will be available on BOEM's website for the project. This website will be dropped in the chat shortly after the completion of these meetings. The EIS will also analyze potential environmental impacts from the proposed project using the best available science and in scientific literature.
Thanks, Kim. Another question also from you. These were 2 sort of similar questions that I wanted to provide to you together from Denise Bosia and Chris Placitella. So the questions are the concerns raised at these public meetings brought to the attention of higher BOEM management? If so, how is that done? And then does the public comment really mean anything? Does BOEM plan to go forward with this project no matter what?
I'd like to thank you both for your comments. There are multiple ways that BOEM and the Department of Interior Management are notified of the concerns raised during public meetings. One way is through the attendance at these meetings, as many of them do attend. And the second is through the development and review of the scoping summary report. And BOEM staff regularly communicates with the public and other stakeholder concerns to BOEM management through the NEPA process. BOEM reviews all the comments and prepares a scoping summary report that is posted on the BOEM's website. The decision to approve with modifications, or disapprove the COP is done through the COP decision process after completion of the environmental review.
Great, thanks, Kim. Next question here is from Denise Bosia as well. And this question is, the EIS for Atlantic Shores contains some minor modifications to the project that they call alternatives. They're really not, because they don't change the environmental impact of the project, and that's what you need to consider to create a real alternative. Why are there no real options left to the EIS to consider?
Thank you, Denise. The EIS for the Atlantic Shores North project has not been prepared. When drafting the alternatives for the Atlantic Shores North EIS, BOEM will take into consideration the comments that are provided during the scoping period and evaluated against BOEM's alternative screening criteria available at BOEM's website. And we will drop this link into the chat as well.
Thank you. The next question is from an anonymous attendee, and the question is, who determined the location of the offshore cables? Why are turbines off the New Jersey coast servicing New York?
Thank you for your question. The Atlantic Shores lease OCSA 0549, pursuant to 30 CFR 585.200 Section B, conveys the right to one or more parcel project easements without further competition for the purpose of installing gathering, transmission and distribution cables, pipelines as necessary for the full enjoyment of the lease. The project easements, which will contain the export cables associated with the project, are proposed by the lessee as part of their cost and will under the required environmental and technical reviews. It's important to note BOEM's jurisdiction stops at the Submerged Lands Act, the SLA boundary at 3 nautical miles offshore. The landfall locations and portions of the export cables that reside within state waters that are outside of BOEM's jurisdiction will require separate federal state permits. Similar to the export cables, the landfall locations and points of interconnection are chosen by the lessee and undergo the required environmental and technical reviews.
Great, thanks, Kim. The next question is from Brian Thomas. As a councilman in Neptune City, with this being the first time that any such notice, I want to clarify whether the station is being located in the borough of Neptune City or Neptune Township. And subsequently, what is the size and scope of this substation, as well as expected easements?
Brian, I want to thank you for your comment or question. We did send this to Atlantic Shores to make sure that we got the information accurate from them. So I'm going to read their response. The project design envelope for the Atlantic Shores North project considers the potential use of parcels and easements located within the borough of Neptune City and within Neptune Township. The size and scope of the potential substation or converter station located within Neptune Township will be dependent upon the technology proposed, the project awarded through a power purchase agreement. As development of the project continues, Atlantic Shores North will engage with Neptune City regarding these activities.
Thank you. And the next question from Denise Bozia. The question is, how can we get written responses of all questions and answers of the virtual meeting for today and for any other dates previously recorded?
Denise, thank you for your question. All questions that are asked through the Q&A function are verbally answered at the end of each virtual public meeting. The virtual public meetings are recorded and the recordings with captioning are placed on the BOEM website in the virtual meeting room shortly after the meetings.
And the next question we have is from Pamela Renee. The question is, Neptune City is currently involved in an introductory flood mitigation plan with Neptune Township, Bradley Beach, Monmouth County, New Jersey, and New Jersey State, and the federal government. Being that the Neptune City substation is being proposed for connection to the offshore wind project, can you please incorporate and coordinate flood mitigation into the plan? Please contact me to discuss this initiative in more detail.
Thank you, Pamela. Your question was also forwarded to Atlantic Shores along with your contact information. And they provided the following response that I will read to you. The project design envelope for the Atlantic Shores North project considers the potential for installation and project components within Neptune City, New Jersey. As the development of the project continues, the Atlantic Shores North project team will reach out to Neptune City to coordinate and collaborate on the project's development plans, with the regional flood management plans also being developed. The Atlantic Shores North project team will incorporate flood management and stormwater controls for all onshore project components as required.
Thank you. And the last question I have for you, Kimberly, is from Eric Nussbaum. The question is, are there any non-disclosure agreements that are signed with Atlantic Shores? It's important for there to be full disclosure of issues and problems.
Thank you, Eric, for your question. BOEM and Atlantic Shores do not have any non-disclosure agreements. BOEM is obligated by law not to disclose certain categories of confidential information, whether it comes from Atlantic Shores or other sources.
Thank you all for those series of questions, and thank you, Kim, for the responses. The next set of questions I have are for Kirby Roots-Murdy, and the first one is from an anonymous attendee. Mr. Kirby mentioned during the 4-3 BOEM meeting that the public stakeholders were engaged during the scoping process in 2010 and 2012. I understand that you engaged the Coast Guard, military, and commercial fishermen, but how were the general public engaged? Did you come to the island? Were there any meetings or mailings addressed to LBI which could be impacted the most? It seems like you're asking for the input after the fact.
Yeah, thanks, Pam, and thank you all for still being online, those that are still here. Appreciate the comment. So starting in 2009, the New Jersey Renewable Energy Task Force began holding meetings that included having members of the public in attendance A total of 7 task force meetings were held from 2009 through 2016. And starting in 2011, with the call for information and nominations, BOEM has provided public notice in the Federal Register and an opportunity for public comment for important steps in creating commercial lease areas for offshore wind development. Information on the development of New Jersey commercial lease areas and public meetings can be found on BOEM's website. I will try to drop that into the chat just to make sure everyone has that. And then regarding the last part of your comment, a public meeting has not been held by BOEM on the Long Beach Island, New Jersey, for this project, OCS A0549. But that said, this location can be considered for future public meetings for this project. So, thanks.
Thanks. The next question I have for you is from Deneen Ostin. The question is, why is the government not considering installing these out 30 to 40 miles like other turbine fields in the world?
Great, thank you for the comment. So the New Jersey lease areas were delineated by BOEM through engagement with the New Jersey Energy Task Force. Information from the New Jersey Ecosystem Baseline Study, as well as from stakeholder feedback and public comment from 2010 through 2012. Additionally, considerations including technology, limitations and trends at that time were considered. And so this included the size and the capacity of wind turbines, the water depth available for foundation types, and distance from shore for transmission. Furthermore, user conflicts associated with vessel traffic transiting from the Port of New York and New Jersey to the north and Delaware River port complex to the south, as well as Department of Defense or DoD activities, limited the ability to consider more seaward areas that would have otherwise been suitable.
Great, thanks. And the next question is from Eric Nussbaum. The question is, who receives the money from the sale of the lease? Does that go to the federal government or the state of New Jersey?
Yes, thank you, Eric, for your comment. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, as we've been referring to it, is a federal agency within the Department of Interior, and it administers the sale and leasing of areas along the outer continental shelf for renewable energy development. Revenue from the sale of the lease area is collected by the federal government. Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind LLC makes payments to the federal government annually for lease area OCS A0549. One thing to note, this project is not eligible for revenue sharing with the state of New Jersey.
Thank you. The next question is from Denise Bosia. Where is the site assessment plan and BOEM's approval of that for this lease area? It seems that BOEM has skipped this step in the regulations.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Denise. Site assessment plan, or SAP, for lease area OCS A0499 was submitted in December of 2019 and approved by BOEM in April of 2021. The lease area OCS A0549, this current project, is the former northern portion of lease area OCS A0499. Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind LLC requested and was approved a lease segregation in April of 2022. The lease segregation did not require a new site assessment plan. Therefore, the site assessment plan for the original lease area is referenced for both lease areas. For a copy of the site assessment plan and the BOEM approval letter, you can visit our website and visit the site assessment plan tab for the project. Thanks.
Great, thank you. The next question from Denise Bosia. The question states, John Deichman asks, how was the eastern boundary set for the New Jersey Task Force in evaluating possible wind areas? How was the western carve-out for the potential wind area determined?
Yes, thank you for the comment. Sorry, I was taking Sip of water. In evaluating the area off of the New Jersey coast, several avoidance areas were excluded from the potential lease areas due to ecological sensitivity. Additionally, a 1 nautical mile buffer from shore to the east of the wind energy area was set to reduce conflict with transit routes of vessels along the shoreline. In evaluating the more western extent of the potential lease areas, technological limitations were another limiting factor. So as mentioned for a previous comment, this included the size and capacity of wind turbines, water depth available for foundation types, and distance from shore for transmission. Furthermore, user conflicts associated with vessel traffic transiting from the Port of New York and New Jersey, as well as the Delaware River Port Complex to the south, and Department of Defense activities were things that limited the ability to consider more seaward areas that would have otherwise been suitable.
Thanks, Kirby. I have one final question for you, also from Denise Bosia, and the question is, why does the New Jersey DEP stakeholder coordination list only include pro-wind energy groups?
Yeah, thanks for the comment. BOEM did not develop the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection stakeholder coordination list. And so we recommend that you reach out to New Jersey DEP with this question. It can be reached at offshorewind@dep.nj.gov. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much all for those questions in that group, and Kirby for those responses. The next question I have is for Ian Slayton, and it's from Deneen Ostin. The first question here is, for each installed turbine, what energy producing site will be turned off in order to achieve the clean impact?
Well, thank you for your question. My name is Ian Slayton. I'm a program analyst in the Office of Renewable Energy Programs within BOEM. The grid is energized by a mixture of sources at all times, and the regional grid operator will balance inputs to meet demand at a given time. By connecting renewable energy sources into the grid, it allows for other variable sources to be reduced. Whether specific power generating facilities are turned off or turned down or put into standby is not within BOEM's purview, but it can be certain that increasing the availability of renewable energy sources decreases the emissions which occur for a given amount of electricity demand.
Thanks, Ian. The next question I have for you is from Eric Nussbaum, and the question is, with turbines 8 miles off the New Jersey coast, what percentage of the onshore wind will the turbines take? Will land see a relative increase in temperature because of a decrease in cumulative wind, which could be captured by the turbines? Has anyone anticipated the impacts on greenheads, mosquitoes, and other insects which are normally negatively influenced by onshore wind? Will a 10% reduction in onshore wind increase insect activity? Has this ever been looked at?
Thank you for your question. Wind wakes from turbines of the size being proposed in the plan we're discussing here have been modeled and occur at a hub height. These can extend several miles aloft, downwind under particular conditions, which would be low vertical mixing, low vertical mixing and low turbulence, so sort of a laminar flow, like a sheet. At ground level, these offshore wind turbines are not expected to interact with onshore conditions. Sea breeze conditions are driven by localized unequal heating of the surface of the land and sea, so no impact is anticipated relating to insects onshore.
Thanks, Ian. The next question for you is from Carrie Buchanan. In BOEM's EIS for Vineyard Wind, it states overall it's anticipated that there would be no collective impact on global warming as a result of offshore wind projects. How does Atlantic Shores or any other project justify moving forward if that's the case? What's the point?
Thank you for your question. The statement was not indicating that offshore wind was not effective, but rather that the scale of the activities contributing to climate change is huge. The full sentence in the Vineyard Wind 1 FEIS, which is in Appendix A, page A-66, is overall, it is anticipated there would be no collective impact on global warming as a result of offshore wind projects, including the proposed action alone, though they may beneficially contribute to a broader combination of actions to reduce future impacts from climate change. So that's the full sentence. In the same way, a single conventional power plant or industry or action did not cause anthropogenic climate change, a single industry or action, it's not going to arrest or reverse global warming and the associated impacts. Offshore wind is an important part of state and federal plans to reducing future warming. The utility of the technology is in comparison to other commercial scale methods of generating electricity. There's no quick fix. Also, at the time of that statement being written, there was about 30 gigawatts of offshore wind installed globally. And today, only a few years later, that was 2021, only a few years later, there's about 6 gigawatts of offshore wind installed globally, with ambitious goals by many nations to increase that number further in coming years, including our nation.
Thanks, Ian. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. During the global pandemic, all I heard at each daily briefing from Governor Murphy was the need to follow the science. BOEM has not supplied any scientific evidence for pros or cons associated with the wind turbine project. When will the residents of New Jersey get scientific proof for recent mammal deaths, evidence that wind turbines will have a positive impact on climate change, and how will turbines lessen the global carbon footprint?
Thank you for your questions. I received some help from our biology subject matter experts to address this first part. To date, there are no known links between large whale deaths and ongoing offshore wind activities. NOAA Fisheries is tasked with monitoring the ongoing unusual mortality events. And for more information from NOAA Fisheries regarding interactions between offshore wind projects and whales, please visit www.fisheries.noaa.gov/, it's shared in the link there. Yeah, look at the chat, and there's a link that goes to it. And it'll have frequently asked questions to that. For the second and third questions, the positive impact of offshore wind facilities in relation to other ways we generate. So the positive impact of the offshore wind facilities is in relation to other ways we generate electricity. That's the comparison that needs to be made. So while there is currently still conventional fuels used in the mining of materials, in manufacturing, and the construction, the operation, and even the decommissioning of an offshore wind facility, the same is true for all other commercial scale electricity generating technologies. With renewable energy sources like offshore wind, the energy used to generate the electricity does not require fuel. A harmonized life cycle assessment conducted by NREL compares generation technologies, and offshore wind does compare favorably, as I believe was mentioned in a previous response, with other technologies, and generally results in less emissions per unit of electricity when all aspects are considered. And we'll share that link again. Yep, there it is, from that NREL study. The draft environmental impact statement will include a comparison of emissions of the proposed project per unit of electricity compared to the existing grid today, to provide a conservative representative point of comparison for the reduction of not just carbon emissions, but other pollutants which impact health.
Thank you, Ian, for the responses to those questions, and thank you all for providing the questions in that section. My next set of questions are for Chris Cruz. And Chris, the first question is from Denise Bosia. The question is, John Deichman asks, does BOEM agree that it must comply with New Jersey detailed CZMA requirements? And has New Jersey DEP officially requested of BOEM that it comply with the New Jersey CZMA requirements?
Yes, thank you. My name is Christopher Cruz. I'm a wildlife biologist with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Anchorage, Alaska. I want to thank you for your comment again. BOEM complies with all the applicable federal laws and regulations, including CZMA. And it's also been in coordination with New Jersey DEP regarding the New Jersey CZMA requirements.
Great. Thanks, Chris. The last question that I have for you is from Eric Nussbaum. And the question is there a minimum size of the stone cobble that'll be used to cover the trenched cable? Obviously, the smaller the cobble, the greater the chance that storms will push this cobble onto the beaches. Has anyone considered the impact of increased stones or rocks on our New Jersey beaches? Has there been an environmental study to even consider that?
Thank you for your comment again. The Atlantic Shores North COP proposes cable installation methods that would bury the export cables, inter-array cables, and interlink cables with adjacent substrate or previously excavated spoils. The Atlantic Shores is assuming in their COP that up to 10% of the export cables, inter-array cables, and interlink cables may require cable protection where sufficient burial depth is not achieved. issues identified today and during the comment period will be analyzed by BOEM in the EIS.
Thanks, Chris, for those responses, and thank you folks for the questions as well. The next set of questions I have are for David Bigger, and the first one is from Pamela Renee. Have you studied making one of the 3 blades black in order to help reduce bird deaths?
Yeah, hello, thank you, and good evening, everybody. My name is David Bigger, and I am an environmental protection specialist at BOEM's Office for Renewable Energy Programs. And yeah, and there was a recent study that found that painting a single blade black reduced eagle mortality at a land-based wind farm in Europe. And although the results are promising, this study was small and needs to be replicated. So approximately about a year ago, a similar study was started here in the U.S. That BOEM is watching very carefully.
Can you close my curtain? What? Close my curtain, please.
Okay. And I will attach a link to the paper from the European study and the press release for the study that was started in the U.S. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, David, for that response, and thank you again for the question. I have a couple of questions coming up for Jerry Weissman. The questions are a little similar, so I was going to try to group them together, but the questions came from an anonymous attendee, from Glenn Gorab, and from Roseanne Sarawatka. Where can the public access the reports of the observers on board the survey vessels that are supposed to observe and halt production if whales are spotted in the area? And what's considered within the area? Have any of the identified deceased whales been observed or spotted near the survey vessels alive? There have been an inordinate number of whale deaths since the project has started. BOEM has stated that there are vessel strikes, but this is because the surrounding of the projects has made the whales deaf, and a deaf whale is a dead whale. Do you think or consider that the humpback whale, which perished during this webinar, died of natural causes? A 4th whale in this area within a month. This is where plans and work are being done for the wind turbines.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Pam, and thank you all for those questions. My name is Jerry Wisman. I'm a marine mammal and sea turtle subject matter expert for this project with BOEM. So BOEM, to try and answer all these questions, BOEM requires strict protective measures for when the offshore wind industry conducts activities offshore, which includes independent reporting by protected species observers, or PSOs, during geophysical surveys. Any interactions with protected species are immediately reported to NOAA Fisheries and BOEM. Offshore wind developers may make these PSO reports publicly available. Regarding the recent marine mammal strandings in the geophysical surveys conducted by offshore wind developers being cited as the cause, the Marine Mammal Commission, an independent federal agency whose sole purpose is the protection of marine mammals, has stated, quote, despite several reports in the media, there is no evidence to link these strandings to offshore wind energy development. For more information on offshore energy development and whales, please see this fact sheet produced by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. I think a link to that letter will be dropped in the chat, as well as the link to that BOEM fact sheet. And to date, no whale mortality has been attributed to offshore wind activities. NOAA Fisheries did declare unusual mortality events, or UMEs, for humpback whales and North Atlantic right whales in the Atlantic in 2017 due to elevated strandings along the entire East Coast. This UME began prior to any offshore wind activities in the Atlantic Ocean. And the humpback whale UME does correspond to an increase in the humpback whale populations on the Atlantic that led them to be removed from the endangered species list in 2016.
Thanks, Jerry. The next question for you is from Carl van Warmerdam. The question is, why is this project going forward when, according to NASEM, potential hydrodynamic impacts of the offshore wind energy on Nantucket Shoals regional ecology, an evaluation from wind to whales, says that there is a limited studies to date and that they should be done during the construction and operations?
Yeah, thank you, Carl, for your question. BOEM is currently conducting the public scoping portion for this project. The impact analysis of the Atlantic Shores North project and impact analysis on marine mammal of that project on marine mammals, including the impacts of hydrodynamic changes, potential changes will be completed during the development of the environmental impact statement. The best available science, along with the information gathered during the scoping process, will be incorporated into the EIS's impact analysis.
Thanks, Jerry. Next question for you is from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, Atlantic Shores admits in their own construction plan that these turbines will have very little positive effect on climate change and sea level rise, and they will certainly ruin the Jersey Shore as we know it. Has BOEM done a thorough evaluation on the following: impact to marine life, including whales, dolphins, fish, shellfish, and birds, disrupting feeding and migration, resulting in an injury and death?
So thank you for your question. BOEM is currently conducting the public scoping portion for this project, and recently announced a notice of intent to prepare an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for this project. The environmental impact statement will analyze potential environmental impacts from the proposed project using the best available science at the time, from scientific literature. Specific studies will provide an understanding of baseline conditions and investigate potential impacts to finfish, invertebrates, sea turtles, marine mammals, essential fish habitat, and other marine and estuarine resources, including oceanographic conditions. The development of the EIS will undergo a comprehensive input and review with our cooperating agencies, which includes the National Marine Fisheries Service and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
Thanks, Jerry. One final question for you, this one from Catherine Wynn. How many takes has NOAA allowed?
Thank you, Catherine. So take, for a little bit of background context for those who may not know, take of a marine mammal is a term that is specifically defined under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. BOEM does not authorize any permits or takes. Only the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NMFS, has this authority through the Endangered Species Act or Marine Mammal Protection Act. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act require that incidental take documents are prepared to estimate the potential for harassment and/or harm resulting from offshore wind development prior to any activities being conducted. Types of incidental take include level B harassment, or behavioral disturbance, level A harassment, or non-serious injury and/or serious injury or mortality. And to view incidental take authorizations for renewable energy activities, including the Atlantic Shore projects, please visit the site that will be dropped in the link in the chat.
Thank you all for the questions in that section, and Jerry, thank you for the responses. The next question I have is for Stan Leback, and this question is from Denise Bosia. Why hasn't BOEM done a numerical estimate for the noise coming from these large turbines?
Hi, my name is Stan Leback. I'm a marine acoustician here at BOEM, and I thank you for all these questions. Currently, BOEM is conducting this public scoping for this project, and the analysis and numerical modeling and estimation of potential impacts for construction and operation will be completed during the EIS, so the Environmental Impact Statement. Knowledge gained during this scoping effort is incorporated into that EIS and will help complete the analysis of these noise sources.
Thanks, Dan. Another question for you, this one from Denise Bosia. Will the EIS contain an airborne noise assessment of the noise received at the shore from pile driving and turbine operation? And John Ditchman asks, Atlantic Shores North will be by far the closest to shore large project in the US and using a very large gearbox turbines. How will BOEM assure the public that the operational turbine noise will not be intrusive to beachgoers and fishermen?
Yes, thank you for this question. Analysis of airborne noise from construction and operation of wind farms is typically included in the construction and operation plan, commonly called the COP. The COP for the Atlantic Shores North is contained in the appendix, and it's Roman numerals 2.5, onshore noise, and we'll drop that link into the chat here in just a second. These analyses will serve as a basis for the results and conclusions that will be included in the draft and the final EIS with opportunities for comment. The final EIS and subsequent record of decision, as well as any identifying terms and conditions for any of these construction events, also will be identified by BOEM and to determine how to best require potential control of these impacts. As a suggestion, I would add that you should, if you have any additional analysis that you want after looking at the COP, any additional analysis of onshore noise associated with this project that are wanted, then you should make that as a scoping comment so that those can be included in the EIS analysis.
Great. Thanks, Dan. I've got one final question for you from Denise Bosia. Regarding low-frequency baleen whales, can noise from pile driving be effectively reduced by surrounding the pile with the sound shield in the water? If so, please explain.
Yes, thank you for the question. The effectiveness of bubble curtains, and here I am assuming that by sound shield, you mean you're referring to a bubble or double bubble curtain, is a frequency dependent event. And for frequencies below about 500 hertz, it's true that the effectiveness is reduced. Although the large baleen whales can hear in that frequency range below 500 hertz, but also up to about 30 kilohertz where the bubble curtains are more effective. This is considered and included in all the required mitigation procedures in the analysis, both by BOEM and by NOAA. And after review of the impacts of that noise, no single mitigation measure or technique is effective in all situations, and a variety of measures are employed and required.
Great. Thank you to everyone who provided questions in that section, and thank you, Stan, for those responses. The next series of questions I have are for Brandon Jensen, and the first one is from Eric Nussbaum. What types of baseline counts have been performed to gauge the impact of offshore wind development? In particular, zooplankton, clams, scallops, sand eel, flounder, whales, dolphins, bunker, and tuna.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking with us tonight. I'm Brandon Jensen, Fisheries and Habitat Biologist for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Thanks so much for this question. BOEM recently announced a notice of intent to prepare an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for the ASOW North project, which we're talking about tonight. The EIS will analyze potential environmental impacts from the proposed project using the best available science in the scientific literature. Specific studies will provide an understanding of baseline conditions and investigate potential impacts to finfish, invertebrates, sea turtles, marine mammals, essential fish habitat, and other marine and estuarine resources, including oceanographic conditions. The development of the EIS will undergo a comprehensive input and review with our cooperating agencies, including the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NMFS, with NOAA, and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
Thanks, Brandon. Next question is from an anonymous attendee, and the question is, the cumulative impacts of electromagnetic fields, or EMF, from hundreds of turbines and immense webs of cabling poses large risk. How can you show that slide just now as if this is not a serious issue for marine life? Studies indicate EMF from high voltage cables have a negative impact on some bottom-dwelling species. Also, sharks, skates, and sturgeon have special organs, making them electroreceptive creatures that are highly sensitive to EMF. Undersea cabling running perpendicular to important fish migratory paths recklessly jeopardizes the fisheries, and most importantly, summer flounder, which contributes hundreds of millions of dollars annually to the state of New Jersey. Within the fishing community, an important EMF concern is referred to as the flounder fence.
Yes, thanks for that question. BOEM's conducted several studies on the effects of EMF, particularly on invertebrates, including lobsters, elasmobranchs, which would be skates, and sharks, as well as fishes. While these species do respond to the magnetic or electric fields from the cables, it did not inhibit their behavior, as in creating a barrier or attaching them to the cable, attracting them to the cable, rather. We welcome additional feedback at this time on any of the particular aspects of interest to address in the EIS during the scoping process. I will drop here in the chat a few links. We've got some additional studies and resources for your consideration. So the first is titled Electromagnetic Field, or EMF Impacts on Elasmobranch, including sharks, rays, and skates, and American lobster movement and migration from direct current cables. That link will be dropping in a second here. Also leave you with EMF impacts on American eel movement and migration from DC cables. We also have summarized some of this information in a couple of fact sheets that BOEM's produced, and I'll leave you with EMF fields and marine life, as well as EMF from offshore wind facilities. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and please feel free to submit some comments to help with the EIS analysis.
Thanks, Brandon. One final question for you, also from an anonymous attendee. Atlantic Shores admits in their own construction plan that these turbines will have very little positive effect on climate change and sea level rise, and they will certainly ruin the Jersey Shore as we know it. Has BOEM done a thorough evaluation on the following: the negative impact to the fishing industry, commercial and recreational boating? To date, I've not seen any evidence that BOEM has taken these issues into account when siting these turbines.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as you know, BOEM is planning to prepare an EIS for the Atlantic Shores project that we're talking about tonight. The EIS will analyze potential impacts from the proposed project and alternatives on commercial and recreational fisheries, usually under Chapter 3 of the Affected Environment and Environmental Consequences section, under the Socioeconomic Conditions and Cultural Resources section, and then a subheading there with commercial fisheries and for-hire recreational fishing. As you may have guessed from the title of this particular section, it will include the social and economic impacts of the proposed project, and alternatives will be considered across a wide range of commercially important species, fishing sectors, and ports. Similarly, recreational boating impacts will be analyzed in the EIS, likely under the recreation and tourism subsection. The boating analysis covers a wide range of activities from ocean-going vessels to small boats used by residents and tourists in protected waters, and includes sailing, sailboat races, fishing, shell fishing, kayaking, canoeing, and even paddleboarding activities. The siting of wind turbines with respect to commercial and for-hire fisheries, as well as recreational boating, will be evaluated in the EIS, also during the development of lessees construction and operations plans, or COP, and during consultations with other federal agencies, including NOAA Fisheries and U.S. Coast Guard.
Thank you all for those questions, and thank you, Brandon, for the response.
Thank you.
Next question is for Marissa Mosier, and this one's from Denise Bosia. The question is, during the Historic Preservation Act process, how will BOEM protect against the destruction of now submerged Native American ancient artifacts from pile driving?
Thanks, Pam, and thank you for the question. I'm Marissa Mosier. I'm a historian with BOEM. So, in response to your question, throughout the National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106 consultation, BOEM consults with federally recognized tribes on the identification of ancient submerged landform features, assessment of effects to those features, and resolution of adverse effects. So ancient submerged landform features may be historic properties that are eligible for the National Register of Historic Places and sites of religious and cultural significance to tribes. Consistent with the Section 106 regulations, the marine area of potential effects for the Atlantic Shores North project encompasses the depth and breadth of the seabed that's potentially impacted by any bottom disturbing activities in the lease area and the offshore export cable corridors. Historic properties, including ancient submerged landform features, are identified in the marine area of potential effects through surveys of the lease area and the offshore export cable corridors, consistent with BOEM's guidelines for providing archaeological and historic property information pursuant to 30 CFR Part 585. The identification of historic properties is described in the Marine Archaeological Resources Assessment, which is available as a public summary with the construction and operations plan on BOEM's website. Historic properties, including ancient submerged landform features, are then assessed for effects from the project in consultation with federally recognized tribes. Adverse effects to ancient submerged landform features will be documented in the finding of effect, which will be released with the draft environmental impact statement for the Atlantic Shores North project. And through the Section 106 consultation for the Atlantic Shores North project, BOEM will consult with federally recognized tribes on resolution of adverse effects to historic properties, including those identified ancient submerged landform features. Resolution of adverse effects may include avoidance or minimization measures, such as compliance with buffers around ancient submerged landform features to avoid or minimize physical disturbance to those features, or other mitigation measures. The resolution of adverse effects will be documented and implemented through a memorandum of agreement and a draft memorandum of agreement will be included with the draft environmental impact statement for the project. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that question, and thank you for the response, Marissa. The next series of questions I have is for John McCarty, and the first one's from Denise Bosia. The question is, John Deichman asks, Atlantic Shores continues to make specific claims about reduced visibility for certain times and percentages of the year based on an old draft study attributable to Rutgers. Has BOEM had that study peer reviewed? Does Rutgers itself stand by that draft effort by people who are no longer at Rutgers?
Hi, I'm John McCarty. I'm the landscape architect and at BOEM at the Office of Renewable Energy Program, specifically the environmental branch for renewable energy. And my area especially is in visual impact assessment. So thank you very much for that question. It's a good question. The COP Appendix 2, M1, Seascape Landscape Visual Impact Report, also referred to as the Sylvia, does reference and makes use of the Rutgers report, referencing the question entitled Initial Visibility Modeling Study for Offshore Wind for New Jersey's Atlantic Shores Offshore Wind Project. And it can be found under section 3.4 on page 29 of the appendix I referenced. The report approximates the influence of variable atmospheric conditions on visibility of offshore wind turbine generators from onshore locations. While the report may be viewed as valuable information by some or dismissed by others, it is basically information provided in the COP by the developer. However, BOEM analyzes visual impacts based on clear day and clear night viewing conditions. Therefore, the Rutgers report is not information that BOEM anticipates using in the draft EIS to adjust any results on visual impact levels. The Appendix 2 M1-Sylvia report may be viewed or downloaded at the link provided in the chat if anybody wants to go and review the report that is referenced in the question.
Thanks, John. The next question for you is from Denise Bosia. The question is, John Deichman asks, the Atlantic Shores North COP includes visual simulations from certain onshore locations, but omits a full treatment for two of the closest venues, Ship Bottom and Loveladies. Why only one low sun condition for those critical sites when more times of the day versions are offered for other locations? Can we get complete treatment of those two sites?
Yes, thank you for your questions again. Again, a very good question. And yes, simulating varying sun angles provides valuable information when analyzing how visual impacts by wind energy features change over the course of the day. The COP, again, the same COP reference I gave you, Appendix 2 -M1, has photo simulations, as you mentioned, that simulate the effects from different sun angles during the early morning hours, midday, afternoon, and on into the night at 7 of the 31 key observation points, also known as KOPs. The 7 KOPs are regionally distributed along the affected New Jersey coastline and include SB01 Seaside Park Beach, KOP BLB02A, Atlantic Shore or Atlantic Ocean Beachfront, which is near the Barnegat Lighthouse, BHB02 Center Street, Beach Haven, and BHB03 Holyoke Avenue, Beach Haven, and LBT04 Long Beach Township, AC04 Ocean Casino Sky Garden, OC05 Ocean City East Surf Road access. The photo simulations may be viewed or downloaded at the link that I will enter into the chat. And so regarding your specific question about can this be considered at the two sites you mentioned, the purpose of scoping includes identifying issues to be analyzed in the environmental impact statement. All comments, including this one, received during the scoping process will be considered, including comments regarding additional key observation points as we draft the EIS.
Thanks, John. I have one final question for you, this one from Denise Bosia. John Deichman asks, has an ADLS system been approved by the FAA for any large offshore wind projects?
Another good question. What I can say is BOEM's record of decisions on and conditions of approval have conditioned the developer to use the ADLS to minimize visual impacts at night or during other periods of low visibility for Vineyard Wind 1, South Fork Offshore Wind, Ocean Wind 1, Revolution, and Empire Wind 1 and 2. BOEM does coordinate with the FAA about the use of ADLS. Please note that the aviation, I also want to, sorry, I kind of jumped into that, but I do want to make a note here for everybody to be aware of, and that is that the aviation warning lights are required to be affixed to the WT or the wind turbine generators during construction when the wind turbine generator rises over 200 feet above sea level. So these lights will remain on in the on position through the construction phase until the ADLS system or aviation detection lighting system is installed and tested as the project moves into the operation phase.
Great, thank you for those questions and thanks for the responses, John. The next series of questions I have are from Mark Jensen. And Mark, there are several questions here that were similar that I've kind of grouped together for you. The questions are from Deneen Osten, Eric Nussbaum, Denise Bosia, and Chris Placitella. The questions are, why will LBI in New Jersey absorb the huge cost and get minimal benefits since energy will be going elsewhere? What percentage of electricity generated in Atlantic Shores North will go to New Jersey residents? In terms of equitable treatment of states, how does BOEM justify citing a project 8 miles off the New Jersey coast with the impact involved to New Jersey and then sending part of that power to New York? And finally, what percentage of the power generated by this project is scheduled to go to New York?
Great. Well, thank you for the questions. My name is Mark Jensen. I'm an economist with BOEM. So the Atlantic Shores North project will sell electricity into the New Jersey or New York markets, depending on the outcomes of upcoming state offshore wind solicitations. If the electricity is sold into the New York market, New York ratepayers will bear the potential increases in electricity costs. BOEM will develop an environmental impact statement to inform decision makers regarding the various environmental and socioeconomic impacts of the project in both New York and New Jersey. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Another question for you, this one from Deneen Osten. Why do we need to give Atlantic Shores tax credits and other financial benefits?
Great. Thank you for the question. Financial benefits such as the federal investment tax credit are needed to incentivize developers to be willing to undertake offshore wind projects. These financial incentives are common tools to support renewable energy industries that are in early stages of their development. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Another question for you, this one from Sharon Mahoney. Wind energy is expensive and extremely intermittent. Ratepayers, and that's all of us residents of New Jersey, will be forced to take on the burden and risk. Offshore wind is a very expensive way to generate electricity. It's 2.6 times more expensive than onshore wind power. What guarantees and measurable performance can be put in place to protect the interest of New Jersey residents? Also, if this project is implemented in response to Governor Murphy's wind initiatives, why is that much of this energy generated will be sent to New York for their use? If New Jersey residents are going to be faced with the financial burden of the project, then only New Jersey should receive its benefits.
Thank you for the question. Offshore wind is currently more expensive than other electricity sources. Measures to protect ratepayers will be determined through state law and the electricity offtake contracts that will eventually be made with New York and New Jersey entities. As discussed earlier, if the project sells electricity into New York residents will bear the changes in electricity prices, although certain impacts would still be felt in New Jersey. And again, the upcoming environmental impact statement will analyze the various potential beneficial and adverse impacts of the project to inform policymakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. The next question is from Glenn Gorab. The question is, this is not a green project, nor will it ever be of any benefit to the state of New Jersey. The BPU rep stated that the rates will benefit ratepayers, but the BPU has stated that the cost of electricity will be 4 times the current rates. How can he say this will be a benefit to ratepayers?
Great. So yeah, thank you for the question. The effects of the proposed project on ratepayers will be determined through the upcoming offshore wind solicitations in New York and New Jersey. The representative from the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities was highlighting New Jersey's efforts to reduce the costs of offshore wind, which could lessen the electricity subsidies needed to incentivize development. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. The next question for you is from Deneen Ostin. You talk about how you're concerned about impacts to marine life and birds, but what research has been done on impacts of nearby turbines to humans and pets? There will be flashing lights, less wind making it to land, noise pollution, and an adverse impacts to the quality of life and mental health.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the question. The upcoming environmental impact statement will analyze the impacts of the proposed project on people and communities. The EIS will include analyses of the project on environmental justice, visual resources, cultural resources, and other resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I've got one final question for you. This one's from an anonymous attendee. Atlantic Shores admits in their own construction plan that these turbines will have very little positive effect on climate change and sea level rise, and they'll certainly ruin the Jersey Shore as we know it. Has BOEM done a thorough evaluation on the following: industrialization of ocean, resulting in visual, noise, and light pollution, and economic and job losses related to tourism, the loss of property values on LBI?
So yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, you raise important questions, and tourism is certainly an important component of New Jersey's economy. And again, in the upcoming EIS, BOEM will analyze the beneficial and adverse impacts of the proposed projects on visual resources, tourism, property values, and other components of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you all for those questions, and thanks, Mark, for the responses. My next question is for Lola Ajilore, and this one is from Kathleen Harper. Lola, the question is, how many times do construction boats need to go out into the water for each turbine to be installed?
Thank you, Kathleen, for your question. Hello, everyone. Lola Ajilore here, program analyst, subject matter expert on navigation and vessel traffic. To answer the question, the construction of a wind turbine is conducted in different phases. These phases are foundation installation, scour protection installation, offshore substation, also OSS. The acronym for offshore substation is OSS. WTG or wind turbine generator installations, inter-array cable installation, interlink cable installation if needed, and export cable installation. Also, several ports may be used during the different construction phases. At this time, it's too early to provide a definite number to the time the vessel involved in the project's construction could go in and out of port to the project area. Atlantic Shores North Construction and Operations Plan, the COP Volume 1, and the Navigation Safety Risk Assessment, the NSRA Appendix, estimate that the total number of vessels required for a single offshore construction activity could range from 2 vessels for scour protection to up to 16 vessels for the OSS, also known as the offshore substation installation. Please visit BOEM's website to access the Atlantic Shores COP Volume 1 and the NSRA for more information. I believe the link was provided several questions ago. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, and thank you for the response, Lola. The next series of questions I have is for Srinivas, and I grouped a couple of questions together for you. This one's from Deneen Ostin and also an anonymous attendee. At the end of the useful life, 20 years, what happens to the turbines? Who will be responsible for demolition and who pays for it? Weather experts are predicting this season in the Atlantic Ocean will be more active than ever for hurricanes, with 30 named hurricanes and 4 to 7 major hurricanes. You just mentioned recyclability of the turbine parts. How can you possibly recycle them after a major hurricane comes through and thrashes these turbines, leaving the parts splattered all over the ocean and eventually washing up on our beaches in New Jersey? What measures are in the construction plan and the operations and maintenance plan to take care of this? What is the responsibility of Atlantic Shores in cleaning this up? I also read that there are numerous oils and chemicals needed in order to operate these turbines. What happens when these chemicals leak into the ocean?
Thank you, Pam. Thank you for the questions. I'm Srinivas Vishnubotla, civil engineer with Engineering Technical Review Branch of the Offshore Renewable Energy Program with BOEM. The Atlantic Shores North Construction Operations Plan identifies an anticipated operational life of 30 years. At the end of its operational life, the lessee is responsible for decommissioning the project. The Bureau of Environmental Safety and Enforcement, or BESE, is the federal agency responsible with oversight of facility decommissioning. BESE regulations can be found at 30 CFR 285. A lessee is required to decommission their facility within 2 years following termination of the lease. BESE requires that all facilities be removed to depth of 15 feet below the mud line, unless authorized by BESE. A lessee's decommissioning application must be submitted to and approved by BESE prior to decommissioning. BESE regulations do not specifically require that the lessee to recycle facility components, but does not prohibit them from doing so. More information can be obtained from section 6.2 of the project scope plan, volume 1, that describes the decommissioning activities for the project, including the turbines. BOEM requires the lessee provide financial assurance covering the anticipated costs of decommissioning in the form of a decommissioning bond or other form of financial assurance in accordance with applicable BOEM regulations. The decommissioning obligation must be guaranteed through an acceptable form of financial assurance and will be due on a schedule to be approved by BOEM in accordance with the number of facilities installed or being installed.
Thanks for that response. I have next a couple of comments that have been grouped together, and these questions were from Eric Nussbaum, Kathleen Harper, and Sharon Mahoney. Will a system be put in place that requires Atlantic Shores to publicly announce and disclose all fires, oil leaks, breakdowns, or any negative impacts or breakdowns that occur with the wind turbines, their blades, or any part of their transmission on shore? How much oil and chemicals are found in each turbine? It's been noted in the Atlantic Shores documents, but certainly not highlighted, that these turbines contain hazardous chemicals such as lubricants, hydraulic oils, and fuels. Each substation generation unit can contain up to 80,000 gallons of oil and 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel. This power distribution system relies heavily on SF6 gas. SF6, as noted, in one of the world's worst greenhouse gases. Wind turbines may look green, but upon detailed review of their operations, they certainly are not green. What operational mandates will be in place for Atlantic Shores in terms of monitoring, maintenance, and emergency action when these chemicals are released into the ocean? Obviously, monitoring and action is much more difficult out in the ocean where there's so little physical oversight at the site of the turbines. How will BOEM ensure that proper and timely action is taken in the event of a chemical leak?
Thank you for the questions. They're all, good questions. There are many considerations in the event there is a marine debris. The draft environmental impact statement will address impact producing factors, including accidental release or spills into receiving waters of a fluid or other substance, such as a fuel, chemical contaminants, hazardous materials, suspended sediment, invasive species, trash, or debris. Upon the project reaching the design, construction, and operation phase, systems are put into place by the enforcement unit of BESE that requires the lessee to submit what is called an oil spill response plan, or OSRP, and a safety management system, or SMS, to address issues such as breakdowns and other failures. BESE closely monitors the operation of the facilities for inspections, maintenance, and repairs through the operational life of the wind turbines and all the other components of the project facility. There are lubricating and hydraulic fluids and chemicals present for the safe functioning of the wind turbines as well as the substations. Oil spill response plans are put in place to prevent or minimize any accidental spill of these fluids into the ocean. It is also required under BOEM regulation and specified in 30 CFR 585.627C.
Great, thank you for that response. Next question for you is from Eric Nussbaum. How tall are the projected towers for Atlantic Shores North? How big are the blades? How big will the monopiles be for these windmills? What is the depth of the water where these wind turbines will be built?
Thank you for the question, Eric. Information on the wind turbine generators can be found in the project's Construction and Operations Plan, Volume 1. The maximum height of the turbines is 319.7 meters. The rotor diameter of the blades is 295 meters. And the monopile diameter is 15 meters. The water depths where the turbines will be placed ranges from 20 to 30 meters.
Great, thank you. And the next comment we have is from Eric Nussbaum. The question is it true that water with chemicals will be used to cool the transmission hubs? Could you please explain how the use of the water will be used in this process?
Sure. As proposed in the Construction and Operations Plan for Atlantic Shores North, seawater may be used in a once-through open-loop system to provide cooling to an offshore high-voltage direct current or HVDC offshore substation. This only applies to HVDC offshore substations. High-voltage alternating current or HVAC offshore substations would be air-cooled per industry standard. Seawater intake for HVDC equipment cooling would typically be supplied by one or more seawater pumps submerged below sea level in pump caissons attached to the offshore substation foundation structure, either electric submersible pumps or shaft-driven pumps.
Thank you for that response. The next question for you is from Denise Bosia. The question is, will this EIS contain a study of the potential radar interference by the turbines with our military air radars in Gibbsboro, New Jersey?
Thanks for the question, Denise. The potential impacts on military and national security and radar systems will be analyzed in the Environmental Impact Statement or EIS. Radar impacts will be further assessed by the project in the Construction and Operations Plan. Furthermore, potential offshore wind radar impacts and mitigations are being analyzed by affected government agencies. BOEM is a member of the Interagency Wind Turbine Radar Interference Mitigation or WTRIM working group. One of the group's primary goals is the development of technology-driven mitigation solutions.
Great, thank you. And the next question I have for you is from Eric Nussbaum. So if the water depth will be 66 to 98 feet deep, how tall are the projected monopiles? Will they be embedded into the seafloor? And how much of a projection will they leave above the seafloor? How much water will there be between the top of the monopile and the surface of the ocean? How wide will this footprint be?
Another great question, Eric. Monopile foundations, which are driven into the seabed, typically consist of a single steel tube composed of several sections of rolled steel plates that are welded together. A transition piece may be mounted on top of the monopile. Alternatively, the monopile length may be extended to the interface with the wind turbine generator or WTG tower. This is referred to as an extended monopile. The amount of embedment depth and the projected height above the mean water line are dependent on the site-specific soil strength and the air gap requirements set in the project design. While the actual dimensions of the proposed foundation design, including monopiles proposed for the Atlantic Shores North project, are still being finalized, the project design envelope or PDE is considering a monopile mudline diameter of 15 meters. The planned maximum depth of penetration below the seabed for the monopile design is around 80 meters without scour protection and 60 meters with scour protection. This totals to about a foundation footprint contacting the seabed per foundation around 176.7 square meters.
So the next question for you is from Chris Placitella. And the question is, what studies does BOEM rely on to prove that these 1,000-foot wind turbines can withstand Northeast hurricanes?
Thank you for your question, Chris. Offshore wind turbines and project facilities are specifically designed for successful operation at the project site location and are designed according to US and international design codes and standards. Before turbines and the turbine blades are made commercially available, they are subject to a robust fatigue and extreme load testing. As hurricanes are a reality offshore New Jersey, the ability to withstand storm events is considered in the design process. Standard design methodology includes considering a 50 to 100-year storm design check with standard safety factors typical to designs across all industries. These safety factors are calibrated to well-known loads with established frequency and intensity. Because of the variability in the meteorological and oceanographic conditions, additional robustness checks ensure survival of the foundations, support structures, and the wind turbine towers to 500 to 1,000-year storm levels to account for the hurricanes seen in the Northeast. For reference, the 5-turbine Jersey Atlantic wind project, the 5 turbines of the Jersey Atlantic wind project located in Atlantic City, New Jersey, survived the Hurricane Sandy, and they were back to full operation after the storm had passed.
Thank you. The next question for you is from an anonymous attendee. No one's addressed the potential damage and loss of landmass due to the fragile ocean shelf and the inability to control turbine blade variation, as depicted in the Woods Hole research finding. Vibration from pile driving and spinning turbines, along with the actual drilling of thousands of large diameter holes in the ocean shelf, potentially will create a massive landslide and loss of shoreline up and down the eastern seaboard. Please look further into this potential man-made disaster before you approve the placement of any wind turbines in our ocean.
Thank you for your suggestion. The information on this and for the information on this study, for each project, the developer is responsible for collecting geophysical and geological data and assessing site-specific conditions that is then reviewed by BOEM subject matter experts, including both engineers and geoscientists. BOEM SMEs assess potential geohazards, including the review of seafloor and subsurface data, as well as relevant studies to determine potential impacts of the proposed activities. For all projects, our sister agency, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, approves a certified verification agent, or CVA, who is a neutral third party that oversees the design verification and verification of fabrication and installation of any approved project. The CVA reviews the site-specific conditions and potential geohazards as part of their verification.
Thank you. And another question for you from an anonymous attendee. Military Aviation and Installation Assurance Siting Clearinghouse reviews and comments on proposed wind turbine project locations with respect to operations of the U.S. military. The Clearinghouse did issue comments to BOEM on the New York Bight in 2020. Has the Clearinghouse issued comments on the Atlantic Shores proposals for compliance? These comments, if they exist, should be made to the public. On their website this morning on Project Under Review, there's no mention of Atlantic Shores as a project. My research found that the Department of Defense, and especially the U.S. Air Force and Navy, have many issues with anything within 12 nautical miles of the shoreline. NEXRAD radar, weather radar, and NORAD surveillance will be adversely affected by wind turbines over 1,000 feet tall within 12 nautical miles of the coast. Please provide the findings of this report from the Clearinghouse.
Thank you for your question. BOEM works closely with long-established contacts within the Department of Defense to ensure impacts on military readiness and operations are avoided to the greatest extent possible. Throughout the renewable energy leasing process, the Department of Defense conducts assessments of renewable energy lease areas to ensure compatibility with offshore wind. BOEM incorporates those Department of Defense assessments into its planning process to avoid and minimize conflicts prior to leasing, as well as during the review of project plans. Specific to identifying the wind energy area off the coast of New Jersey, DoD provided a helpful color coding of where specifically within the call area they recommended exclusion of wind energy development based on their DoD training operations and activities. This information, specifically the recommended exclusion areas, were incorporated into the wind energy area and the subsequent lease area.
Thank you. The next comment for you or question for you is from Eric Nussbaum. The question is, are there plans to put a large battery storage system onto LBI? Where will that battery storage facility be located on LBI, and how big will the batteries be?
Thank you for your question. BOEM will look into the question to be included in the cumulative analysis, but as of now, BOEM is not aware of Atlantic Shores North to set up a battery storage system on Long Beach Island. And this is not part of the construction and operations plan that has been submitted to BOEM.
Thank you for that. And then the last question I have for you is from Lisa Bonanno. And the question is, I have a question about protecting the turbines from malicious attack. Is there a plan to protect the airspace and marine navigation near the turbines?
Thank you for your question, Lisa. BOEM considers malicious attacks on offshore wind facilities unlikely. But if one were to occur, the impacts could vary depending on the magnitude and extent of any such attacks. And the actual impacts of this type of activity would be similar to other non-routine activities, including accidents, but will be analyzed in the EIS. The developers are expected to have regular maintenance schedules, which they provide to BOEM and our sister agency, BESI, in annual reports. Regular maintenance will help prevent the need for emergency maintenance. Despite this, emergencies do happen. All turbines are controlled from a control center, which has the ability to control each turbine independently and remotely. All developers, including Atlantic Shores North, are required to develop and maintain an emergency response plan. This plan outlines processes and procedures, including specific engagement with U.S. Coast Guard and the Department of Defense in the event of an emergency, be it a severe storm, a vessel incident, or a malicious attack. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions, and thank you, Srinivas, for the responses. So those are all of the questions that were shared through the question and answer box, and I'm going to turn things over to Lisa Landers, the NEPA Section Chief of the Environment Branch for Renewable Energy with BOEM, for a few closing remarks. Lisa?
Thanks, Pam. Good evening. Again, my name is Lisa Landers, and I'm the NEPA Section Chief in the Environment Branch for Renewable Energy for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM. Thank you to ICF and BOEM staff for holding a successful virtual public scoping meeting for the Atlantic Shores North offshore wind project. And to everyone that participated in today's meeting, I want to thank you for spending these last few hours with us and for the many thoughtful comments and questions you submitted. All comments received today and during the comment period will be used by BOEM to inform the preparation of the environmental impact statement for the construction and operations plan. I hope this has been a good forum for you to share your comments about aspects of the projects that are of concern to you, and that you have found our answers to your questions to be both useful and responsive. Your input is essential to ensure that the best informed decision will be made for the proposed project. I also want to reiterate that there are multiple methods available to you to provide your scoping comments by May 2nd, 2024. BOEM proactively extended its standard 30-day comment period to 45 days in order to account for the Vineyard Northeast offshore wind notice of intent 45-day public comment period that is overlapping this public comment period. Comments can be submitted through regulations.gov using docket number BOEM-2024-008 or mailed to BOEM enclosed in an envelope labeled Atlantic Shores North COP EIS and addressed to Kimberly Sullivan, National Environmental Policy Act Coordinator, Environment Branch for Renewable Energy, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, 45600 Woodland Road, VAM-OREP, Sterling, Virginia, 20166. As a reminder, a recording of today's virtual meeting will be posted on BOEM's website. And thank you again for participating in this evening's virtual public meeting.
Thank you again for your participation, everyone. This virtual public meeting is now adjourned.